Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to another Faith-Seeking Understanding. I'm your host, Allan. I am a pastor, retired, a professor, a Bible moth, a theologian in exile, and a peddler of hope. And I am the self-appointed Anselm of Canterbury Chair of Podcast Theology and Culture at Faith-Seeking Understanding University, a completely made-up university, but where all seekers are invited to ponder profound things free of charge. I have a great honor today to welcome my professor of many moons ago when we were both much younger, Stanley Hauerwas, who I know needs no introduction, who is the Gilbert T. Rowe Professor Emeritus at Duke Divinity School, Duke University, author of many books, and Stanley, thank you so much for your willingness to do this.
It's good to be with you again, Allan. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time, and it's good to be with you. And the fact I know you're in demand, so that you're willing to do this is a gift for me, and I receive it as such. So thank you so much. We want to talk today about your book, The Character of Virtue, and here it is, folks. I'm going to put links in the descriptions so that you can click into the link for the book, folks. Letters to a Godson. And I just love this book. And I want to begin the conversation by stating two reasons why I wanted to have this conversation. The first is, as being a pastor for 38 years before I retired, I did baptisms, and we had people who were godparents. And I was just so heartened and touched to see the importance placed on the role and the seriousness you took the role of being a godparent to Lawrence, Laurie, and his father, Sam Wells, who also is a writer, thinker, theologian, and is he still at St. Martin's in the Field?
Yes.
Yes, okay, in London. So my first question is tell me how this came about, that you became Laurie's godparent, and then you wrote him letters, and which finally gave rise to this book.
How it happened was Sam and Joe Wells, who is bishop in the Church of England, when they were here and they first had Laurie, they asked me to be one of the godparents. And I said, I'm honored to do it, but I never know what to do as a godparent. I mean, do you tell the kid, take God seriously, and then that's it? So Sam said, well, I'll give you something to do. Every year at the anniversary of Laurie's baptism, you're to write commending a virtue to him. And so I started doing that. I thought that was a good assignment. And I hadn't intended to publish them, but as they developed, it seemed like it was appropriate to have them shareable by a good number of people. So I started writing them, not just to Laurie, but always I was sure I was writing to him, but also to a wider audience. And the result is The Character of Virtue. I did it over 14 years.
Wow. How old would Laurie be now? About 20, 21?
No, he's about 23.
23. Okay, so you've seen him grow up. Wow. Yeah, I wish I'd have had this book earlier in my ministry, because I would have given it to godparents to read.
Well, I hope it's staying in print and that's happening.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so pastors, if you're listening to this, you consider doing that. The second reason that I want to talk to you is I just have to say I'm really discouraged right now, very, very discouraged for some time with the church's lack of the importance of character, particularly in reference to leadership. It has seemed like that has been enhanced in the last few years, but it's been a problem before. That we just, whether it's the leaders who we elect, or whether it's even pastors, the stories we've heard of late about particularly large churches, mega church pastors who abuse people in various ways, and then instead of the leadership of the church attempts to shut the victim up and accuse them of being divisive if they want to go public. I mean, I got to tell you, it is depressing that to me that Christians seem to have just accepted this idea that when it comes to particularly leadership, character doesn't matter. What's going on?
I think, given the state of mainstream Protestantism in America, people in the ministry find that they are frightened of the people they are called to serve, because disagreements just are not supposed to be front and center, and that the people that are in the churches are so miserably shaped by theological tradition. So what it means to be a Christian is, well, I suppose you need to believe something like that to start it all. And that's about as deep as it gets. And you just can't minister to people well without deeper theological substance than is offered by the churches that have come out of the mainstream. I mean, my own view is that the Reformation is over. That what was the Reform worked, and Catholics now represent what the Protestant Reformation wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we still have denominations?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about, why would anyone want to be a free will Baptist? I mean, do you really think some concept like free will is worth a separated church?
Yeah.
Or do Methodists really think that they represent a sanctificationist tradition now? Most Methodists wouldn't know what you mean when you say sanctification. So, I mean, ministering to folks under those conditions means that you fundamentally, as a minister, need to be personable. But who wants to go through life being personable?
Yeah.
I mean, it just would wear you out to always think that you need to have a pleasant personality in order to survive.
Yeah.
So those are just, some of my offhand.
No, I've thought often too that what's happened is we want our leaders to be what I call purely functional, meaning we want our leaders to do for us what we want, whether they have character or not. Is somehow beside the point. It's sort of the excess baggage. If you're an honest, truthful person, but you do what I want, that's good. If you're not truthful, honest, but you do what I want, okay, we can live with that.
I can't. I just find, and I'm just ignorant about these matters, I don't understand what sustains people going to Joel Osteen's church.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you go to that kind of church? Television is better.
Yeah.
That there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll just.
I think it was Sam Wells in his introduction to this book was talking about you and said that you essentially are not happy that in some ways the gospel in America has become therapy.
Right.
And that's kind of what it seems like, doesn't it? It's like one big therapy session. Maybe that's insulting to people in therapy. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the Osteen stuff is just so puerile. I mean, you don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
That the prosperity gospel is so clearly shallow.
Yeah.
Yet they get away with it.
And one of the things, as you say that now, the prosperity gospel, one of the things that you do in several of your letters, which I appreciated, was you mentioned to your godson that he is a person of privilege, born into privilege, lives in privilege. You acknowledge you're a person of privilege. I'm a person of privilege. And yet, and also, by the way, to say about being personal privilege, that certainly has obviously allowed us to do some of the things that we've done in life. But you also present it as a caution, a trap.
Well, the presumption that being a Christian will make your life successful is a very dangerous presumption.
Yeah, and that you also say that what's happened to us in America, Christians in America, is that we want security because of our fears, and we don't want to suffer, and which of course is a strange thing for those of us who follow Jesus, right? That suffering is not something that we want to do. And I thought you had some insightful comments on Bonhoeffer, who talks about the church in Germany and the avoidance of suffering, and that was part of the problem in the church's support of the Nazis.
Yeah, I just don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
Those quotes from Bonhoeffer, I think they're not the quotes that most people direct people to in Bonhoeffer. But I think they are at the heart of what he was about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right on that. So let's talk a little bit about some of these. One of your things I like about your letters is, and it's not a surprise to me, having read a lot of your stuff, that you connect all these virtues and things to just daily life. You talk about large events happening depending on the year. You talk about Afghanistan, Iraq, and other things. You also talk about your cats, which is great, and you talk about baseball. So just one quick story. I smiled when you talked about in your book about your cat. When you and Paula got married, you brought your cat Tuck with you. And I remember being a student of yours, I still remember this, and I don't know why, but you came into the room, you needed to get rid of Nip. You had Nip and Tuck, and you needed to give Nip to someone. And my first thought was, how do you separate Nip from Tuck? Right. The second thing you talk about is baseball. And I appreciate your baseball's the greatest, civilization's greatest gift, as I recall. That you say, and I have referred to baseball as the greatest sport ever invented, which in Ohio can be fighting words because we love football here and and the Buckeyes. So I appreciate it, but I appreciated those connecting what you have to say to the experiences of life and the experiences that we have as Christians in the journey. You begin by kindness. You begin with kindness. Which is interesting. Why kindness?
Because it's the virtue that must shape our lives as young people. And children are not necessarily kind. They can be unbelievably cruel, particularly to one another. And I wanted to hold up the importance of kindness as a formation of habits that make life worth living.
Okay.
And so, children are open to formation and kindness. And I give the example of petting the dog. I mean, petting the dog is one of the ways that you are initiated into the formations we call the virtues. And because the virtues, you seldom become virtuous by trying to be virtuous. You become kind by petting the dog.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know that you're being formed virtuously, but it turns out to be the case. So it was my way of trying to show how the virtues ride on the backs of practices that we hardly notice are occurring, but in fact make us more than we otherwise would be.
Yeah, you say that you believe kindness to be the very character of God. I can hear some people now reading that saying, well, what about love?
Right. Well, love has become the desideratum of Christians who are not sure they believe in God, but they think love is a good idea.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I'm writing right now. I'm working on a sermon for Maundy Thursday from John, and after Jesus washes the feet of the disciples, he gives a new commandment I give you. You are to love one another as I love you. And you have to think about twice about what does it mean for Jesus to love us.
Yeah.
And love can be a fairly harsh regime, but it is still nonetheless love.
Yeah.
And so I don't make love one virtue among others. It is the virtue that covers all the virtues.
Yeah.
Shaped Christologically.
Right. And it's those virtues that helped us understand what love is.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. You say that in your comments about love, you say in the chapter that kindness is not the same as sentimentality. I think I heard you say somewhere also kindness is not the same thing as nice. You're not really into nice from things I've read over the years.
No.
So what is the difference between kindness and nice and sentimentality?
Kindness can be difficult and hurt those who are kind. And that hurt makes it possible to recognize sentimentalities that I oftentimes will confuse with niceness. I say now that I'm back among the Methodists, I have discovered that the Methodists have a conviction. It's that God is nice, and that since we're a sanctificationist people, there's a correlative. We ought to be nice too. It's hard to get through the crucifixion and think that that was nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard you say that elsewhere, and I tell you, I've quoted you many times over the years to the consternation of my Methodist colleagues. You know.
Allan, you're still a Methodist, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Can I ask you how?
Yes, that's a good question. Well, one of the reasons I refer to myself as a theologian in exile is because I'm not sure I have a real theological home in a tradition. In a church tradition. I mean, there's things obviously that I appreciate about the Wesleyan tradition. I think the question for me, having been newly retired, is if I were to find another tradition, which one would it be? And so I look to be appreciative of the things in Methodism that I still value and find to be what I think to be substantively good, but I can't tell you that I am a card carrying UMC Methodist. Our church now, you may have seen it, United Methodist Church, in the midst of all the disaffiliation going on. They've got this campaign called BUMC, and they've got people, district superintendents, pastors, and lay people doing videos of why they're United Methodist. And, that's fine, but that's not something I could do because it's not that there's things I don't appreciate, but that it's, I just find it to be right now what's going on to be in many ways a mess. And I just find myself not to be in sync with my colleagues who either call themselves progressive or traditional. It's just, so I'm still here, but if you have any advice for me, I would I would take it.
I don't. Whatever it means to be a progressive, I go to the Church of the Holy Family, so I've been there 20 years, so I'm now I assume an Episcopalian. But if the Methodist mess, I would. The horse is out of the barn when it comes to gay marriage.
Mhm.
My view is that let's give it 100 years and see how well they do. Heterosexual marriage hasn't been done very well. Can gays do better? I don't know. But what worries me is that the traditionalist critique of that presupposes that we have had a clear understanding of what marriage is.
Yeah.
So rather than deal with gay or not gay marriage, let's try to figure out what we mean by marriage.
Yeah, which is, by the way, a conversation I don't think we really want to have. Or either we just don't want to have it and we don't feel equipped to have it, because I have brought up those kinds of questions to my colleagues and said, we've got to talk about all kinds of interesting things in reference to what's the purpose of marriage theologically? What about children? What about children? And I've also brought up the issue that there are and there's hardly any of them, but there's a few in our denomination now starting to open up the door to polyamorous relationships. And I'm saying, we got to have a real theological discussion about this, folks. And it's just that nobody really wants to have it.
Oh, I've said from the beginning that the arguments used in support of opening marriage to non-traditional forms is you're not going to be able to stop it.
Yeah.
At gay marriage, you're going to have polyandrous marriages.
Yeah.
Whatever that means to call it marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so what's really depressing is that, and I have brought these issues up with my colleagues, just to have conversation about this. Let's work through this and let's have conversation. And no one just really wants to have it.
Divorce and remarriage is not exactly celebrated in the New Testament.
No, that's right. And then, as you say, on the progressive side, whatever progressive means, I really dislike that term. But whatever. But on the traditionalist side, you're right. We seem to have this assumption that we've had this coherent institution called marriage, meaning heterosexual two people. But it's not clear throughout history that we've really had that or really understood it. Oh. Yeah.
We forgot we're supposed to be discussing the character.
We are, but but character and virtue come into this kind of thing, because what kind of people are we going to be that we can commend and then we can uphold the kinds of relationships that are committed and truthful, and what does that look like? Right. And yeah. So anyway, but thanks for that little divergence. I appreciate you asking me that. So I've gone public now telling why I'm still a Methodist, even though I'm just not sure where else I would go at this point, to be honest. So I'm going to hang on to, and I continue to be involved in our conference and denomination in ways I think I can help. And sometimes involved in ways that I poke at people. So that's helpful for me. Let's get to truthfulness. I appreciated your discussion of truthfulness. You have said in other venues, I've heard you say that we Christians owe people the truth. And what does that mean, to owe people the truth?
Well, you begin by thinking that I don't want to say what I think. I don't know what I'm saying when I say it, and tell people they ought to believe what I'm said.
Yeah.
Now, I think that carefulness with speech is extremely important for being a people that have a stake in not lying to one another. And it's very easy to engage in speech acts that are less than truthful as truth, because the lie is so attractive. So to be a people of truth is to be committed to a community of people who will call one another to account in order not to say what is clearly not truthful.
Why is the lie so attractive?
Because it leaves us so oftentimes in control, and as a result, we are able to preserve our illusions about who we are in a world where illusion is seldom challenged.
And that, as you say that connects me to your letter on friendship, which is very important to you. And as you're writing to Lori, and this is this is when he's still very young. And you talked to him about their moving to the United States because his parents have accepted positions at Duke. But when you talk about him moving to the United States, here's what you say: you will discover things, or at least I hope you will, about the roots and history of the United States that are devastating, that Americans in the past slaughtered Native Americans, and that we were a slaveholding nation. These are stubborn facts that remain largely unacknowledged in American public discourse. Americans, like all people, find it difficult to acknowledge wrongs that are so wrong. There is nothing we can do to make them right. The sad result is that America remains a country in denial. I also want to extend that to say, in many ways, the church in America is in denial.
Well, I think that's certainly true.
Yeah.
I couldn't say it better than you said it.
Okay. I mean, I just, we are in just denial, which again is a little strange, because at the heart of our faith is repentance, right?
Of course.
And sanctification, as you've already said, we're not, as Methodists anyway, we're not really into that. Yeah. So, and then you also talk about confusing American ideals with Christian practices. We could spend a lot of time on that, but can you just highlight a couple places where you would point to where we have confused American ideals with Christian practices?
We think something called democracy, which underwrites the presumption that we each get to make up our own lives, is the same thing as being a good Christian. my offhand way of putting it is modernity in America is the great exemplification of modernity. Modernity names the time when people think they should have no story except the story they chose when they had no story. That's called freedom. And the only problem with that is, of course, the idea that you had no story except the story you told when you had no story is exemplified by the presumption that we don't think we ought to be held responsible for decisions we made when we didn't know what we were doing. But of course, that makes marriage unintelligible, because how could you have known what you were doing when you promised lifelong monogamous fidelity?
Yeah.
Art makes having children unintelligible, because you never get the ones you want.
Yeah.
So the presumption that Christians support a social order that believes it should have no story except the story it told when it had no story is the confusion of Christian faithfulness to God with the democratic presumption that our job is to free everyone so that they are able to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of confusion that's around today.
Yeah. 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 I appreciated when you say in certain contexts, the great thing about being the Christian faith is we don't get to make it up. We just get to receive it. And that gets a lot of pushback from some people because we just kind of want to have some say. We want to determine ourselves, right?
Right.
So your chapter on patience, which you say is the most, no virtue is more important to me than the virtue of patience. Why is that so?
Because we as Christians are an eschatological people that live between times.
Yeah.
He is crucified, he is risen, he will come again. We are a patient people waiting for him to come again.
Patience doesn't work too well when you want things to change and happen.
True.
And we probably get in trouble when we are not patient with certain things.
Impatience is war.
Yeah. Yep.
To have something settled. So the necessity to use violence we take on, and with an impatience that means we can't wait.
Yeah. I thought about, because you also talk about simplicity, which is a really good chapter that I like, but you ask the question about, you talk about the virtues being context dependent, and one of the things that I thought about as I was reading that in reference to patience is, of course, Christians should have patience, but I have spent time in Cuba where I teach Methodist pastors there. And I've done that for 15 years now. They have, because of their situation, because of where they live and the situation they live in, they have had to learn patience. They are far more patient than I am. Patience in reference to where the food's coming from, patience and just, you name it, they have to be patient. So are there sometimes, depending on the context, some virtues that should be more pronounced because of where we live, right? Because
Absolutely.
So patience is a big thing for us Christians who live in America.
Right. Do the Cuban pastors have good senses of humor?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my goodness.
I think that's part of the correlative of patience.
Yeah, and I mean, I will tell you that the times that I have laughed so hard that I'm aching has been sitting around the dinner table with my Cuban sisters and brothers, and they are. Right. And you're right. And you talk about humor. I really appreciated that. And you connected that with you connected that to, I'm trying to think which one you connected that to.
I can't remember.
Yeah. Humility.
Yeah, right.
And humility is certainly something they have felt. Sometimes not in more humiliating, but so I thought of the minute I saw the title of that chapter, I thought of the song "Lord, It's Hard to Be Humble,"
Right.
which is a little humorous, but of course, as you mentioned, humility is not something you can seek. Kind of hard
Right.
to do that.
No, you can't. To try to be humble means that you won't be.
Yeah. Yeah.
It comes from being initiated into a craft that requires great skill
Yeah.
in a way that requires you to submit yourself to a master.
Mm. Yeah, and it's one of those virtues that if you have it, you don't realize it. It's just something that you are, someone you are, part and part. You talked about humility becoming more human, and you want to talk about how what being virtuous is about is actually becoming more human. That you, I'm assuming you rightly would reject the idea that being human and being a sinner are not the same, which often happens. We often excuse our sin by saying, I'm only human.
Right. No.
Yeah.
Excuses. Those excuses are very dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem with my sin is not that I'm human, it's like that I'm less than human, that I'm revealing less than what God wants me to be. We got time for just one or two more. You talk about temperance. And you say, temperance is the virtue made necessary by the fact that our lives are constituted by desire. And I really like the way you talk about desire. You say this on page 159. You say, when I'm asked, why should I be moral? I reply, do you like to eat? We need to eat, and that need pulls us into life and all of its complexities and pleasures. What should I eat? How often should I eat? How much should I eat? A temperate person must take pleasure and enjoyment in eating the right things rightly. So temperance is more than denying myself?
Oh, absolutely. Temperance is to desire the right things rightly.
Mm-hmm.
So temperance is to shape our lives in ways that make other virtues possible. For example, if courage is absent temperance, then it's just foolhardiness.
Mm-hmm.
Courage, the courageous person shaped by temperance fears the right things rightly. Because if the courageous person doesn't fear the right things rightly, they're just foolhardy. They're not courageous.
Yeah.
So the courageous have fears the coward can never know, exactly because the courage is shaped by temperance, which means you're open to to being fearful in a manner that makes courage necessary.
Yeah. Very good. Interesting. You in generosity too. I was struck by something in your letter on generosity. You say to be a generous person certainly will manifest itself in generous acts, but generosity is a virtue that's more fundamental than the giving of gifts. How is generosity larger than the giving of gifts?
Because it involves receiving a gift. What most people fear is by receiving a gift, they're in the control of the one that is given the gift. But exactly what it means to be a Christian is to learn to have the acknowledgement of our life as a gift rather than something that we have owned.
Yeah, so I've often thought about at Christmas time, you know, if somebody unexpectedly gives me a gift and that I didn't have on my list and didn't plan to buy a gift for, but they unexpectedly give me a gift, my first thought is not, what a wonderful gift, thank you for this this unexpected joy you've given to me. My first thought is, oh my goodness, I didn't get them anything.
Right.
Right. So now, and I'm afraid of that person sort of being in control now. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like forgiveness. You said before that being forgiven, the willingness to be forgiven is learning to live out of control.
Right.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, being in and out of control are central metaphors for me, because as Christians, we have been called to be out of control by God's good grace to make us more than we otherwise would be.
Mm-hmm.
So being out of control makes life more interesting.
Okay, very good. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm about finished, Allan.
Yeah.
My voice is going.
Yeah.
I just want to say it's lovely being with you.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for this. We're about at time anyway. And so I just appreciate you being with, spending some time here in this conversation. And I remember one of the things you said at the beginning of your book, you talked about life having a plan, and you said you never really had a plan in your life. You just kind of did what people wanted you to do. And so I just want to thank you for that vocation, because you have enriched a lot of us in our faith journey. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And may you continue to survive in Ohio.
I will. Thank you. All right, friends. Thank you so much for this. And this is Faith Seeking Understanding. And we hope that you all have a good day. Take care.